All right, and here we are. We're live on everywhere except for YouTube, and I'll explain that. We're going to be talking about YouTube removing our most previous episode, big tech censorship, the chilling effect that type of censorship has for speech and expression on today's episode of the In the Tank podcast. For everyone that watches, we have a little behind the scenes. We have this little intro video that we play there with the music, and there is a second version of that is the Justin version of it, which was a joke. And every time that I have to play this video, I'm always concerned that Andy, our producer, flip-flopped the names of the two, and I'm going to accidentally play the Justin version. So far, it hasn't happened, but surely I jinx myself. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. Joining me today, we have got Jim Likely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you today, good sir?
I'm doing well. I'm pretty excited to be on the pirate radio edition of the In the Tank podcast since we've been banned from YouTube. But, no matter how bad it is for us in trying to do streaming and media out here, we're still not having as bad a week as everyone at CNN.
Well, that's true. That's also true. Probably have just as many viewers right now as CNN.
Probably.
Chris Talgo, senior editor at the Heartland Institute. He is streaming out of a bunker. What's going on, sir?
Yeah, from the bunker at home. Chicago area has been decimated with some snow, so we're doing all we can here.
Yeah. And Samantha Fillmore, who longtime listeners will recognize. She's been on the show a handful of times. State Government Relations Manager at the Heartland Institute. How are you today?
I am well. Snowed in, happily cozy at home, and happy to be joining you. Thanks for having me. It's been a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I kind of teased in the intro, or actually, let me preface this. I think this is going to be a little bit out of the ordinary show. Usually, I have a list of topics filled with articles. We go through the articles, we talk about the topics, we get in depth on policy and politics, that type of stuff. This is going to be a little bit more of a free-flowing conversation because something happened last week. Last week, we were doing our show as we normally do on a Thursday afternoon. We talked about a handful of topics. I forget exactly what we talked about. I know we talked about COVID at one point, something else. After we finished recording, within an hour of our show being, cataloged on YouTube after it is live, it just goes up on YouTube permanently, we received a notification that our episode was pulled down and given a strike because of quote-unquote COVID misinformation. So this has happened to our show one other time when we had talked about a Time magazine article. I don't even know if I should get into the details of any of this stuff out of fear that we're going to be censored again, but I guess we're not on YouTube, so we should be a little bit more free in the conversation. But so anyways, when we got this news that our channel received a strike, my reaction was like, stupid YouTube, whatever, going on with my day, going back to work. And then I just kept thinking about it. And especially because Andy chimed in and he was telling me about if we get another strike within a certain window of days, then our channel could be blocked for like a month. And if we get another strike after that, our channel risks being completely deleted. And so I was thinking okay, well, what do we do this next week? Do we just be a little bit more careful about what we say with COVID? And one other thing, a piece of context with this. When they give us this strike and they give us this warning, it is not specific at all. And Andy, if you want to jump in and kind of fill in some of the gaps here, but am I correct? They don't tell you specifically what we did that broke any community guidelines or anything like that, right?
Yeah. So YouTube at least tells you what video or what piece of media you put out there that actually got you the strike. Facebook doesn't even tell you what post it was or anything. But essentially, they say that you violated medical misinformation. Right. And all they do is provide you a quick link. And what that link does is it gives you a list of about 400 things. And if you violate one of them, just a single one, their automated system will mark you as medical misinformation. So we know that was the general, section that we violated. We don't know at all what part of it. So it might have been we mentioned vaccines. It might have been we mentioned hydroxychloroquine.
Lockdowns.
Yeah,
right.
we don't exactly know what part it was. And we basically, you're allowed to review and say like, oh, we didn't violate this. But if you don't actually know,
but we probably did.
Yeah, I mean, we'll lose that. But also, if we don't know what we said, how can we say that it's not misinformation?
So this was an important thing to me, because I was thinking like, how do we make sure that we don't trip over, we don't cross that same line when they don't specifically tell us what we did that broke these community guidelines. So I was thinking like, all right, next time around, maybe we're just a little bit more careful when we're talking about COVID, because we don't want to risk the channel being deleted.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking like, this is exactly what they want. Like this is exactly what they want us to do. Because if it was just like some little thing, okay, we could avoid saying this or something like that. But it's not. It's so broadly defined. The slap on our wrist was so broadly defined that we don't even know what it was that we crossed the line. So to be really safe, if we wanted to be as safe as possible, we just wouldn't talk about this topic anymore. And I just realized what I was doing was self-censoring. And the more I thought about that, the angrier I got. So as soon as we got the check, I was like, yeah, whatever, wrote it off. But then throughout that afternoon and into the night, I'm just like getting so aggravated about like me self-censoring and all this. And I'm like, you know what? Screw it. Next week, we're dedicating the entire episode to these concepts. And I really want to just hash it out. So I got the whole band in together here. We got 6 people on the screen. Justin's coming in late here. Justin Haskins. I don't even know what your title is unless I have it written down. So welcome to the show. What's going on?
It's good to be here. I'm still recovering over that fight I had this morning with that gentleman at the gym over the mask, which is a whole different.
Justin threw some fisticuffs this morning. But
it was very frustrating. I'm having flashbacks. We have to move on.
Yeah, let's move on. But I wanted to talk about this, and this coincides with news that we've seen kind of in the same track of Joe Rogan and Spotify, and there's been a couple of other things that I wanted to kind of talk about that are underneath this umbrella. But just right off the top, Jim, I mean, you probably are more concerned about these strikes when it comes to our channel. What was your reaction when that came down?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm more concerned because if our Heartland Institute, what I call the flagship channel for the Heartland Institute, gets nuked from space by Google YouTube, there goes 38,000 subscribers. There goes about 7 million views of our videos over the years. We founded that channel in 2008, so we've been with YouTube for a very long time. There goes literally probably more than 1,000 videos we've posted over the years. It would all just be gone in an instant. And again, for committing a crime that we don't even know that we committed, or we can't get specifics on it. And you put this, you stated this perfectly, Donnie. The vagueness of it is the point. Yeah. It's so that you self-censor. It's so that you don't even bring up these topics that YouTube and Google just arbitrarily decide can't be spoken about. We used to joke, and I used to tell you about this all the time. There's a lot of YouTube channels I follow. The Quartering is a good one. Most of it's geek stuff, geek pop culture stuff. Nerdrotic is another. And I told you, Donnie, that they call COVID-19 the COOF, because COVID is one of those words that the AI that they employ will find, and then all of a sudden there's a little flag on there. And now they're really going to drill down and see what you say, and see if you say other things that are wrong speak. And the thing that was kind of ironic about our podcast from last week being taken off of YouTube is that none of us said anything that we hadn't said on this podcast several times before.
Right.
And so, but this time is the time that it trips the algorithm, and then we get in trouble, right? We get a strike on our channel, and a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, and I know a lot of people on this podcast have watched Steven Crowder's channel on YouTube, and he seems like he gets another strike every other day, and he's still there, so I always wonder, well, I don't really not that concerned about having a strike, because gosh, Steven Crowder gets strikes all the time, and his channel still exists. But I know that it's a big hassle. I know that he has to do a lot of appeals. But the whole point is so that you wouldn't say that, you don't talk about things that are not approved frankly, by the left. I mean, you're allowed to talk about COVID as long as you say that Anthony Fauci is awesome and that everything he says has been correct, but he hasn't really been wrong. We're doing it on the best science, all that kind of stuff. But again, it is to make sure, or to discourage strongly, because people, we don't make money off our channel. This isn't our business, obviously, but there are a lot of independent content creators out there who do depend on the money they make from their YouTube channels for a living. Like those two guys I just mentioned before, the Quartering and Nerdrotic, that's their business now. And so they have to be very careful. And so that's why they say things like the Coof, or, the Critical Drinker is another guy who makes money on his channel. And he calls it the unnamed virus of unknown origin, or unspecified origin, right? He says that all the time. The fact that we have to talk around in America, in a country that supposedly values free speech so much that it is the First Amendment to the Constitution, the fact that we have to talk around things in order not to flag the fascists. Oh, here I just probably did it. The fascists who run YouTube at Google it's ridiculous. And that's why we're going to continually start to live stream on Rumble, which is a platform that does not have these sorts of things in place and does actually value free speech.
Yeah, I was like, so we have some plans of what to do to have the show uncensored, unself-censored, to continue on without threatening the main channel. But I don't know if we even can talk about that right now or what. But you most certainly will be able to find our videos still live streaming on Facebook and Rumble for sure. I think that unless you're going to subscribe to those specific things and keep a lookout for us, I think the next best thing would be, I don't know, like maybe we have to come up with an email list just in case, like whatever platforms that we're recording our show on go under. But yeah, this is the situation that we're in. We have to work around this. But to Jim's point, some of these people that make a living off of it, we don't make any money off of this. But people that make money off of YouTube, they can't run the risk of their channel going under. So they have no choice but to self-censor. So I mean, again, this plays exactly in the way that they want it to. If it was specifically defined, you can't say this one thing. You can't say the color of the pen is red or something like that. Easy. Okay, I can avoid that. I don't like it, but I can avoid that. It's this broadly defined punishment that makes it so sinister, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if you look at the Canadian trucker protests up there in the Great White North, there were people that were live streaming the protests from their phones, and YouTube took those down. Right. And so they have this enormous power. At the Heartland Institute, I used to do tech policy for the Heartland Institute back when tech was a lot more innocent and small than it is today. But we advocated on principle that, the Wild West, as it were, in the digital economy was a good thing, because it allowed the market to really be vibrant, to churn out new ideas, new companies. And we pushed back pretty hard against people on the left who said that the government should be regulating websites and companies like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and all of that stuff. And we said, no, the government should keep its hands off of that stuff. That we should be allowed to let the free market work, let customers and users decide how these things develop. And now our reward for that is to have our YouTube channel given a strike, to have big tech now censoring anything and everybody who doesn't toe the party line, the government line, whether it's COVID or protests on the Capitol Hill at a certain date in the past, and what have you. And so now we've got to this point where these companies are working as, frankly, arms of the state, arms of the left. And, I wish I could have seen that coming. But nobody saw this coming. This all happened, and I hate to keep bringing it back to it, but when Donald Trump got elected president, all of big tech decided that was a huge mistake, and they felt personally responsible for the fact that Hillary wasn't president, but Donald Trump was. And ever since that time, big tech and all of these enormous companies have done everything they can to suppress anything that doesn't toe the leftist, liberal, Democratic Party line. And that's the world we live in right now. And I hope there's a light somewhere at the end of this long, dark tunnel, but I don't see one yet.
I think a really important distinction to make, though, Jim, is when initially conservatives and people on the right were protecting big tech corporations, it wasn't about, we dealt with the antitrust paradox and looking at these companies and allowing them to flow freely in a free market. We are still for that. We're not against. This isn't about antitrust. This is about free speech. It's entirely a different issue. But when as a member of GR, when we're going into the state testifying on legislation that would otherwise try to curb censorship from big tech, opponents of these legislation will say that we're falling into a very leftist, otherwise protected, non-conservative, like antitrust. And that's not what we're doing at all. And it's the amount of gaslighting that happens in these committee hearings. It's absurd. Speaking of like self-censoring, the mental games that are being played in some of the conferences that I've been in with lawmakers from around the country and otherwise industry leaders for the lobbyists on behalf of big tech, the gaslighting is wild. They convince you that you are wrong and that it's not about your First Amendment right as a citizen, but rather the First Amendment rights of these corporations. That is their tagline through and through. It doesn't matter about your rights. It's the rights of these companies. And that's exactly how they go about this. And that's what's fearful about it's terrifying. I didn't realize that an international company with the GDP of a small third world nation has more rights than me as an American born citizen.
Well, and almost to that point, like when we hear these stories, Jim, you brought up Crowder, I already brought up Joe Rogan. It's like there's almost an expectation that like the bigger dogs in the field are gonna have be under like the closest microscope, right? The most scrutiny when it comes to what they are having to say. But the fact that like our show and like 99.9% of our viewership is all audio. There's only a sliver that actually tunes into our YouTube show. But so our like show gets like 500 to 1,000 views per episode, and it still comes down on us within an hour of our show being up. So it's like it came real to me. It's like something that I've heard about, and it's like these people are dealing with, and now it became real to me when it's on our doorstep now. And it's just like any other small fish in this pond are just going to be like decimated, absolutely decimated when it comes to this type of stuff.
I mean,
or kneel down and kiss the ring. So you got two options.
Right. Well, so I mean, it's easier to kill the little guy. It's actually much harder to. It's way easier to use algorithm, the power of technology, to kill 10,000 small voices because nobody ever finds out about those people and no one cares. But if you want to take down Joe Rogan, it's a big news story, right? Sure. So in a way, the opposite is true. Like, yeah, they scrutinize everything Joe Rogan says, but it's way harder. Sorry,
that's the guy. That's the lawyer of
buy my house.
That's the lawyer of the guy that Justin beat up at the gym this morning.
Yeah, no, it's actually Klaus Schwab. We have a meeting set up in a few minutes. But no, look, that's really the issue here. I mean, the idea that the big guy is the one being targeted and the little guys are not. I mean, how many people have been thrown off of social media that we don't know anything about?
Oh, sure.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of people, right? And so this has been probably going on to some degree for a very, very long time. And the more they rely on AI and stuff like that to make these decisions for them or to suggest these things for them, the more likely this sort of thing is going to happen. And you're going to have mistakes and they're not going to care to correct it because what does it matter to them whether, some podcast with 500 views or 20 views or 50 views or whatever the case may be for these really small channels? Like, what do they care about them? Yeah. And then just going back. Well, sorry, you can comment on that.
Well, no, I just like people getting banned. Our show being taken off. Okay, now our channel is out 500 to 1,000 views. Big whoop. But like the lasting effect and that effect that like it's going to potentially change the way we talk about topics infinitum, for now on, like that to me is the bigger thing to be concerned about. How many channels have been kicked off is one thing. How many channels have completely changed the topics or the way they talk about topics because of those few channels that were kicked off? That to me is the larger point. It's almost like the invisible man argument or something.
Right.
But like, I think that's a huge thing that doesn't get a lot of talk. We don't talk about that a lot.
I totally agree with that. Before we go into some of because I know that Chris has some incredible stories about some of the issues we've run into.
Oh, I want to get into that.
I definitely want to get into that. But before we transition to that, I do want to just briefly comment on something that Samantha said earlier about, what corporations are saying in reaction to this, and not just corporations, but many people who consider themselves to be on our side on 99% of the issues, like, maybe the Cato Institute and groups like that, that say that this is, if you start going down this road, you're no different than the people on the left. You're basically just a far left-wing liberal now on these topics on free speech. So, you're pro free speech when it's beneficial to you, but then you want to silence the free speech of these companies when it doesn't benefit you. This idea. The thing that is so irritating about this argument and so incredibly frustrating is that it acts as though there is a free market and that they're trying to protect it, when in reality there is the free market in this space doesn't exist. In fact, the free market said that you could sue these companies. You could sue Facebook, you could sue any website, in fact, that had comment sections or anything like that if they left up defamatory material under a variety of different conditions. That's what the free market said. Courts ruled on it, they decided on it many, many years ago. And so to protect this industry and to allow social media companies to exist, because they could not exist without this, they passed federal laws, special protections that got rid of the free market idea of these people are supposed to self-police themselves and everything, so that they could have this universal blanket protection with the idea that they would only use it in the cases of really profane, awful, things like people getting beheaded or pornography or child pornography or things like that. That was the idea. Clearly, that was the idea. And that's how basically everybody operated up until recently, as Jim pointed out. This really wasn't an issue. Now, all of a sudden, it's a giant issue, and they run behind this idea of free speech and that they have all these rights and that this is about free market economics when they have a special carve-out in federal law, not part of free market economics, that gives them the ability to exist. Without that law, they literally would not exist. You would not have Facebook today without that law. It wouldn't exist. So our government, our elected representatives paid for with our tax dollars, this government has allowed these companies to exist and make billions and billions and billions of dollars and become the most powerful people maybe ever to exist in terms of controlling free speech. And then they have the gall to turn around and tell us that they have some special secret right to throw thousands or even millions of people, if they want, off of their platform whenever they want, even if they're telling the truth, just because they don't like the speech and that they have some special right to it.
Right.
It's like, screw you. You don't have the right to do that. This isn't about the free market. There is no free market involved whatsoever when it comes to this issue. They exist by our good graces, the citizens of this country. That's the only reason they exist. Without our special legal protections, they would not exist. And so, I mean, that is so important for people to keep in mind. We are not trying to, if we want a free market, totally free market, let's go for it. Fine with me. All these companies would basically close overnight if that happened.
Yeah. People claiming that it's a private business. They could do whatever they want. It's just like you're missing so much of the context of it.
Yeah, and Donnie, just remember when Parler tried to form its own free speech oriented network, what did the big tech oligarchs do? They shut it down.
Yeah, if you want your own social media platform, then you got to make it yourself. Okay, well then if you make your own social media platform, well, yeah, but you need to make your own servers too, and you also need to make. Oh, you got your own servers? Well, you also need to make your own cell phones and your own operating systems and your
app stores.
And app stores. Yeah. You got to make all that stuff too. It's like, give me a break. I mean, this is obviously a scam. It's designed to silence free speech. That's very clear. And the idea that this is about freedom in any way is totally ridiculous.
Go ahead, Samantha.
Very similarly, and more importantly for the audience, if they're not aware, Heartland, through our government relations department, we have been working across the country, worked on 77 pieces of legislation last year, all attempting to challenge big tech censorship in some way. And literally, Justin, you took a line that is, I swear I probably say in my sleep now from my testimony and the amount of times that I say it. But opponents of that legislation would claim that it's a free market, and it's not. The protections given in Section 230 are in fact a corruption in the market. So by enforcing state-based legislation, which by the way, there's totally an exemptions clause in federal statute for state-based legislation, which again, gaslighting, lobbyists for big tech will tell you that it goes against nullification and supremacy clause. It does not. There is a paragraph 3 subsection E in Section 230 that allows for state-based laws. But in any instance, before nerding out on that too much, they will tell you that you are just anti-free market. And I'm screaming, I'm pounding on these lawmakers' doors. Like, no, this legislation would correct this corruption in the market. Truly, if it were a free market, big tech would forfeit their protections tomorrow. And then everything would be free and fair. And it's the insane gaslighting. I have sat in a room with a lawmaker who was essentially hired by the prime lobbyist group for big tech, saying that the censorship from big tech is best for the democratic process because she was able to use Twitter to change her campaign around and switch a district from blue to red. So censorship would hurt other lawmakers from doing that. And I'm literally here like about to check myself into a psych ward or to get a psych eval done because I'm like, no, the amount of lawmakers that I know who during their election cycles have been removed, it's staggering. This inherently skews the democratic process. Free speech is very important for citizens, but let's talk about the fundamental tenets of democracy. Anyone running for office needs to be able to reach their constituents and their would-be voters, and they are not because of this. It is wild. It is obscene. It is ruining the democratic process, swaying it in the way of anyone who has any free original thought. It's obscene and it's ridiculous. And again, I just can't believe the gaslighting. If you guys were to experience it, that's why Cameron and I have like, anytime someone's nice to us, we're afraid. We're like, we'll have to talk later about our mental compensation for this job, but that'll be a conversation for you and me later, Jim.
Yeah, great. Looking forward to that. I want to get to what Chris can add to this conversation specifically on things. Heartland's experience, I think, is going to be pretty shocking because it goes right into what Donnie said about self-censorship and the fear. The big tech has such power that companies that would normally you would think would stand up for free speech are afraid. They're afraid of free speech. They're afraid of allowing people to exercise free speech as they had in their businesses for a long time for fear of big tech censorship. But I'll also say just one thing to wrap a bow on what Samantha said, and I don't know if she is comfortable with me saying it, and I'm actually a little uncomfortable saying it as well. A lot of these people on the so-called right, the libertarian right, have been bought and paid for by big tech lobbyists. They are paid to show up and oppose us in these hearings and to argue that we're wrong and that we're anti-free market because we're trying to stand up for the rights of individuals to exercise their free speech online. That's all we're doing. It's all we're doing is that people have a right to free speech online, that these are, a company as big or a platform as big as YouTube. There's certain rules that should apply and do apply in different contexts and that are not applying when it comes to speech only from one direction on the right. But a lot of our so-called, a lot of our friends, a lot of people that we agree with on 99% of almost everything else, they are getting money from big tech to go to these hearings and oppose us and really, frankly, to confuse the issue in front of these state legislators who should know better. And I think we're doing a yeoman's work on that for sure, because we have actually had a lot of victories on that front.
Yeah, I do want to get to Chris on this op-ed or this other thing that Jim was kind of alluding to, but I will say that we do have a plan to move forward with this show. But for the sake of protecting our main channel, we're going to create our own channel on YouTube for the In the Tank podcast. And like I said, we're not going to self-censor. We're going to talk about all these important topics. There was even an article about a certain potential medicine that you could take as a therapeutic for COVID that I wanted to talk about. And I was like, can we even talk about this? So on this new channel, we're going to be free to talk about any of this stuff, because if that channel goes under, so be it. There's probably going to be like a handful of subscribers. So it's going to be called the In the Tank podcast. So look forward to that. We're going to start live streaming on that next week. And I will say that this is actually kind of like a short-term solution, because I was saying after we got the strike on this COVID misinformation, just wait until they start dishing out strikes this liberally when it comes to climate change stuff. The Heartland Institute page is toast. It's absolutely toast. So we've already started to see effects of this type of censorship when it comes to climate change related topics. And Chris, you can kind of fill us in on this, because we talked about this very briefly in an episode like a month ago, maybe a couple of months ago, but I think this is super important. So why don't you take us through this a little bit?
So just real quick, Donnie, before I go into the op-ed problems that we've been having, I just wanted to say one more thing about the lack of a free market. Jen Psaki, on many occasions, has gone up and defended Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, deplatforming conservatives. Overwhelmingly, big tech gives money to Democrats.
Oh,
The
sure.
Democrats and big tech are working together. So this notion that, oh, well, big tech can do whatever they want because it's their, it's their website, it's their platform. That's not true, because they're getting pressure from the government. Jen Psaki just said that she thinks Spotify should do much more in relation to the Joe Rogan misinformation problem. So this idea that these companies are not working and doing the bidding of the Democratic Party is just completely not true.
Right. So, Chris, you at the Heartland Institute, a number of our employees and whatever will write op-eds, and to kind of centralize this a little bit, make sure everything's going out in a organized fashion. You are in charge of actually editing and pitching these op-eds to a myriad of publications. And the topics include pretty much everything that we cover at the Heartland Institute, from education, budget and tax, healthcare related stuff, climate change, of course. And you have talked about how you're actually finding it difficult to find places that will actually accept our climate change stuff, not because the points being made in these op-eds are inaccurate or, even necessarily controversial, but because of what they might run into, the repercussions they might run into on social media. So take us through this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to name any names here, but
don't name any names. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, but there are a bunch of prominent outlets who we have been, having a relationship with for many years, and then all of a sudden, probably 6-8 months ago, of course, a couple months after the Biden administration took over, they started to say, certain topics, especially climate change, we just can't touch anymore because of the potential backlash that we're going to get from, big tech and the powers that be, which, to me was so shocking. And unfortunately, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, one of the publications literally spelled out, if we post something on our website and it gets shared on our social media, even if it's an automatic share, because sometimes websites have that where the articles are automatically shared to social media, that it could be flagged on social media, and then anything else in the next, weeks, any other posts that are put up there is throttled down. So if they have one article talking about climate change that gets flagged for any reason, that could risk a ton of clicks and a ton of impressions, things that are super important to these websites and
revenue. That's where their revenue comes from. Yes,
exactly. So now because of these slaps on the wrist from big tech, these things are being incentivized to just steer clear of these controversial issues like climate change. It's crazy.
It's the chilling effect that we were talking about earlier, because what they're saying is, we don't disagree with anything in this article. We are not saying that there's any, facts that don't align here. However, we are worried that by posting it on our website, that it's going to, impact us negatively in the future, and therefore we're just, not going to do it anymore.
Right. Yeah. So it's just, again, this to me, it kind of goes side by side with that Invisible Man thing, where it's okay, this one article is flagged for disinformation. That's the effect that we can see, the overt effect. But these kind of under the table effects that it's having, the implications that it's having, are so much larger. We're just seeing the tip of the iceberg here, and there's so much more that underneath the water level there that again, I just don't think gets enough attention. It's crazy. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I used to be the weekend editor at The Blaze several years back, and The Blaze is one of the top 15 or so conservative websites. Had a very, very, very large audience even on the weekends, which are not known for being the busy time. And we had access to every algorithm, every statistic tracker, everything you could possibly imagine. We would run ABC tests on our titles to see which titles would do better and which would not. We had, every social media tool in the book to determine slight differences between articles and titles and timing of posts and everything. I mean, these big websites have it down to a science. They know when there is a slight change, even a slight change percentage wise in how an article does by producing it in a certain way or presenting it in a certain way, the pictures, all that stuff. So if there is a big website, a big conservative website, we know there is. It is a, top 20 or so conservative website, major traffic, and they are looking at their social media statistics and they're saying, we can tell that this is happening based on our tools and algorithms and all this stuff. We know it's happening and that it is hurting us badly because we rely on these big social media followings we have. Then I guarantee you, there are many others who see the exact same thing, and probably many others who are acting on it, but just aren't admitting that that's what they're doing because they don't want to admit. If there's any positive thing about this particular publication choosing to do this and censoring itself and censoring its contributors, its longtime contributors, it's at least they're honest about doing it to us. At least they told us, hey, sorry, it's not that we don't want to publish it, but we can't afford to do it. There's a bunch of others who we highly suspect, because of the nature of all of this and the relationships we've had and everything else, highly suspect are doing the exact same things, but won't openly admit that that's what they're doing. And when we ask them about it, they won't even answer the question, some of them. And it's not just climate change. The other topic that the same publication told us about, and we've had trouble pitching this as well, is anything having to do with COVID. If it's about COVID, not the sort of the social policy aspects of it, but anything having to do with vaccines, anything having to do with treatments, anything having to do with statistics being, not quite what Lord Anthony Fauci tells us, any of that, then automatically it's flagged, just like the climate change stuff. It doesn't even matter what we say about climate change. If the algorithm flags it, it's going to flag it and it's going to penalize these people. And COVID is another one of those issues. And as long as that's going on, there is going to be censorship. Not just there will be. It's happening already. That's the thing. There already is censorship.
What, Andy, are you having a heart attack over there? Yeah, but and this isn't just like the New York Times or any of these like mainstream established papers that we already kind of check out as being like not on our side. Like, we're talking about conservative publications here. So because of the actions and the throttling and all this stuff that Facebook is doing on their own platform and all of this stuff, like, we could see a world where even your conservative outlet that you like to go to read news won't host articles talking about climate change or COVID out of fear of what the big tech is going to do.
We're talking about very conservative publications. We're not talking about middle of the road, leans to the right. We're talking about very conservative places that have done this to us.
The big one that's doing it to us is one that everybody listening to this podcast has heard of. It's one of the titans. It was an early adopter of a conservative website. It is a big website, and we have a great relationship with them. Top 20 for sure, but it's been around for decades, and it was one of the first real big ones to establish itself in that marketplace.
And can you even blame them?
Like, no, I don't blame them.
Why are we outing them if they're doing this stuff that's bad or whatever?
We're not outing them.
It's because, why aren't we? And it's because I can't even blame them for doing this.
No, this is just...
The rules are being set by big tech. They're playing by the rules.
If the choice is between running a climate realist op-ed from the Heartland Institute or having my entire business that I've spent decades building blown up overnight, that's a very, very easy choice, and I don't blame them for one second.
I choose Heartland Institute. Burn it down.
Burn it down.
Loyalty over everything else. No, yeah, you're exactly right. And it's money. That's the thing people need to understand, is that these places, as Jim alluded to earlier, it's all the traffic is the money. That's their survival. That's the only way they survive. They're not making lots of money on these prearranged advertisement deals like newspapers might have done in the past or something. It is based on clicks.
Right.
It's all based on clicks. So if the traffic slows down even for a day, they're losing a huge amount of money, because we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people a day coming to these sites. In some cases, millions of people a day coming to the really big ones. And so it translates directly to cash. So for them, they have no choice. It's either that or they start firing people, laying people off, you know? So they have to make these decisions. It's just so disheartening to see it, and to see it happen in two very important topics. It's sort of like, you know, this idea that, well, you know, big tech, they come out and they say, well, we're not going to censor, we don't censor conservative speech. It's like, yeah, you're right. You don't. As long as we're talking about low taxes and reduced regulations, like that's fine. But if we start touching on anything that is really hot, that really matters, that's essential to our freedom or our preservation of our society, well, then no, you're not allowed to talk about that and give your opinion. The left can say whatever they want, but you guys, you can't say that. That's not allowed. And no matter how many times they get these things wrong, which is a core part of all of this, they shouldn't be doing it regardless of whether they're right or wrong, because free speech should always be promoted with very, very few limitations. But they've been proven wrong like a million times about all sorts of different topics, from Joe Biden and Hunter Biden's laptop, which they wouldn't let anyone share, to just a massive trove of COVID-related issues that they've been wrong about throughout this whole process. The origin of COVID, the idea that COVID may have emerged from a lab, and they dismissed. They wouldn't even let people talk about that until the Washington Post ran a story about it. Now we know that scientists were telling Anthony Fauci about that right from the very beginning, saying, yeah, we think it might have come from a lab. That was treated like a crackpot, fringe, crazy theory. And turns out Anthony Fauci was being briefed by scientists who said that in the earliest days. And yet we weren't allowed to share it on social media. There's been a million of these kinds of stories that they have gotten wrong, and then have had to reverse course later on when it became obvious that they were wrong. And because even establishment people were admitting it. And so it's so dangerous. If you want to live in a society where the truth is available to people, we are fast approaching a world where that is not going to be a possibility,
right?
With the exceptions of what the people in big tech want you to hear. Well, that's it.
Your point about the laptop thing is actually expands this into a bunch of different angles, because, you know, if this was just COVID, like, okay, like, you know, I think people can wrap their heads around this. If it was just COVID and climate change, like, again, I think some people could just wrap their heads around this. But like the fact that like that story, which is about like a sitting president's son and like potential conflicts.
He wasn't a sitting president.
Oh, it was before that?
Yeah, it was before that. It was right before the election. That's why they did it. That's why they did it right before the election.
But it was like that. There's such a crackdown on anyone talking about that. It was like unprecedented. But now, again, any of these companies or publications, websites that are making these decisions, you know, about climate change, not wanting to host articles talking about these issues, like they also have to think about, oh, this really juicy thing is coming. I wonder if we're going to get punished if we talk about it. Yep. You know what? Not worth the risk. Maybe we shouldn't. Like,
yeah, this story is really bad for Democrats.
We don't even have
we shouldn't talk about it.
We don't even have like a freedom of press if you carry this out to this logical end.
Yep. Without a doubt.
I'm so worn out by this. I have to lean back in my chair.
It's overwhelming. It really is.
It is overwhelming, and it's if you think about it, you know, big tech basically runs. They're like the mafia. Hey, that's a really nice YouTube channel you got over there. Be a shame if anything happened to it. Hey, that's a great website you've built for over 20 years to support yourself and your family, and I don't know, 120 employees. Boy, be a shame if something happened to it by you putting on a climate realism op-ed in there somewhere. And it's so they can claim they just pretend, look, we're just trying to make sure that there isn't misinformation out there. We're just trying to make sure that these things are verified by actual journalists or by government officials who are telling us what's real and what's not real. And misinformation and fake news is a danger to democracy. They say these things so that they can just pretend. And again, Samantha sees these in the hearings that she's in, where the rubber meets the road on these policies. That they say, look, hey, we're not stifling anybody's speech. We're just making sure that people get the right information, and we have a right to do that on our platform. And it just happens to always go in one direction. It just always happens to just benefit Democrats who are running for office and not Republicans. It just so happens that bureaucrats like Anthony Fauci, who has probably said 120 different positions on all different aspects of the COVID-19 coronavirus and the CDC, and it doesn't matter that they've changed their stories. It doesn't matter that the conspiracy theorists, people labeled conspiracy theorists a year and a half, 2 years ago, are now 100% validated. There is no humility on with these guys. There's no sense that they did anything wrong or that they got anything wrong. They're just following the science. And the real thing that gets, with Heartland Institute, we're experts on climate and energy, and so we know this topic very well. Our videos are getting flagged as as climate change misinformation. It's been doing this for 5-6 years now by people who have no expertise in this topic at all. Do you think the people that flagged our video from last week talking about COVID-19 misinformation have any expertise at all on that topic? Of course they don't.
It was probably Anthony, the Science Fauci, personally sitting there watching our show and hit that button.
Definitely it was. But these people, these are 20 and 30-year-olds who have some kind of liberal arts degree making these decisions. They don't have any expertise to make these decisions. They actually don't know. And Joe Rogan, to come on all the way back to that, his only crime was having 3-hour conversations with people who are actually experts on COVID-19. Dr. Malone is one of the inventors of the mRNA vaccine. You could not find a more qualified person to talk about this in a lengthy conversation. And now Joe Rogan, I know that his apology or his statement that he put out the other day with all this Spotify controversy, people are saying it's not that bad. Joe's not going to back down. Joe's going to back down. Joe Rogan is going to back down. He's already indicated that. He's going to balance his discussions now. So instead of having a long conversation with a real expert on a very important topic to everybody in the world, and trusting listeners to be smart enough to figure out, to absorb all this information and weigh it against everything else they know, our big tech mob, the mafia that is big tech, that is policing all of our speech, thinks all of us are morons and that we will do anything Joe Rogan says. If he says don't get the vaccine, nobody's going to get the vaccine. Look, dudes, it's been 2 years. We've had this vaccine for more than a year and a half. Everybody who wants the vaccine has gotten the vaccine, and everybody who hasn't gotten the vaccine is not interested. Move on. It is not Joe Rogan's fault that 15% of the American people are not vaccinated.
That's not what it's about. It has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with them actually thinking that. It is just an excuse to say it's just an excuse to throw people off that they don't like. That's all it is. It has nothing to do. There'll be something else tomorrow. There'll be some other crisis. There's always some crisis that the left says we're not allowed to talk about. You mentioned the fact checker thing. I think that's really important. Chris, I remember a while back you wrote this op-ed that was about Facebook, and there was like some lawsuit or something where it was about fact checking. Do you remember that?
John Stossel.
Yeah. So what was the deal with that? Because they had to admit something in the lawsuit itself, right?
Oh,
they
I
did.
remember this.
Yeah, they did. They said that their fact checkers are actually opinion based.
Right, that's right. So they were sued. And in the lawsuit, their brilliant lawyers, to get them out of legal trouble, had to admit that their fact checks are actually just people's opinions, just like everyone else's opinions. It turns out they are not the arbiters of truth. Their own lawyers admitted it. That's right. And that was absolutely incredible. And that tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? If it's really not about misinformation. We're dealing with opinions in many cases, and they even admitted it themselves in that lawsuit.
It's about controlling the narrative. That's what it's about. From a 30,000-foot level, whether it's COVID-19 or whether it's voting or the Russia collusion or whatever the story of the day or the week or the month is, they want to have a complete domination over the narrative, and unfortunately, they're doing a good job of that.
Sammy, I thought you were going to jump in.
I think that something that I think should occur to everyone, or occurs to me when we think about this, is it's just offensive. It's purely a combination of government regime and tech and these corporations saying, hey, Americans, guess what? You're too stupid to look at different sides of a story to think for yourself. You don't have enough cognitive integrity to hear an opposing an opposing viewpoint or opposing arguments and think for yourself. That's the first thing and it's honestly on its face just offensive. Furthermore, I would like to, similarly, Donnie, you were talking about creating this culture of self-censoring.
Mhm.
And I kind of want to take that a step further in the fact that it's creating this like tattletale, I don't like what I hear, so I'm going to do something about it culture.
No doubt.
And by that,
Absolutely.
I'm kind of going to plug an interview that I did a few weeks ago with Matt Dean, someone else from our healthcare guy from the government relations department, and Dr. Scott Jensen. He was a former senator in Minnesota, and he's also been a practicing physician for, I don't want to mess up, but a very long time, to the point where one year, I believe it was 2015, he was voted the Minnesota Family Doctor of the Year of the entire state. This is a great, spent his life building a practice, which is his livelihood. Then he starts to run for governor, and he starts writing things that we've seen on Joe Rogan, right? Like prescribing ivermectin as, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. See, but like,
okay, we're screwed.
Anyway, but prescribing that and alternative solutions to COVID. To that point, he has been called before the medical board 5 times in the last year. This man who was the family doctor of the year. And this threatens his livelihood, it threatens his practice, but also tie that in with the fact that he's, I might have said, or I might have missed that he's also a gubernatorial candidate for Minnesota now. So in him doing his civic duty as he feels and running for office where he should have a free platform, he's been deplatformed many times, unable to reach voters, unable to reach constituents that he would otherwise need to reach and that his opponents are reaching. But in that happening, people will see his tweets or comments about alternative treatments to COVID. And then people who aren't even his patients are seeing this and then calling the Minnesota Medical Board of Directors. Right. And then it's right. So it is both his job as an elected official or a former elected official who wants to serve his community, but also his job to provide for his family and take care of his patients. They're all tied in and they're all being threatened. And it's like this narrative isn't going to end. We're creating this culture where people don't like what they're hearing. They're going to, when does someone see an Instagram post that I don't like and they call, right? They start calling the Heartland Institute to tell me that I'm not fit for employment or that I'm not fit for, or raising kids eventually, right? Like, sorry, it's frightening, and I am very. Something needs to change.
I wanted to say this earlier, but if you can't count on even conservative publications to run articles about climate change or anything like that, you have to go and seek it out yourself. So I'll, once again, I don't often do this on this show. It's a Heartland Institute show, but pitch Heartland websites. So heartland.org, climaterealism.com, climateataglance.com. These are regularly posted articles on all of those websites talking about these things.
Heartlanddailynews.com.
That one as well. So then the other thing that I wanted to mention, this is also to kind of back up that point that I was saying that this isn't going to end with just COVID misinformation or climate change misinformation, that it's actually more far reaching than that. There was a tweet by Justin Trudeau of Canada, one of the most, I won't even say it, but obviously in Canada, for those that don't know, there's a big convoy thing of trucks that are doing a protest up there. It's big news in Canada. But Justin Trudeau tweeted the other day, today
Prime Minister Zoolander or Blackface. You could call him one of those two.
Yeah. Today in the House, members of the parliament unanimously condemned the anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-Black racism, homophobia, and transphobia that we've seen on display in Ottawa over the past number of days. Together, let's keep working to make Canada more inclusive. So it's just throwing everything against these truckers and this protest that has nothing to do with any of those topics that he listed off, but it's still being labeled as those things. I saw another article that was saying how some anti-vaccine graffiti was spray painted on some school or something like that. And it was a picture of spray paint that said freedom. So the idea that freedom is some anti-vaccine statement just shows you how they can just turn anything into a controversy about anything. and then stifle that speech. So if we were to theoretically write an article endorsing or supporting this, truck driver, trucker protest that's going on in Canada, it could potentially be flagged on social media for being, I don't know, let me look at the list. Anti-Semitic. So it's like it's as far-reaching as you could possibly go, especially if it's not challenged at any level. So yeah, it's just the power that these big tech has is so much more far-reaching than just what is controlled, the content that's controlled on their actual platforms.
Look, this is the playbook. Look, they have complete control. This is what drives me kind of nuts, and I think all of you guys as well. They have complete control over the culture. They have complete monopolistic control over the entire culture, except for things like this, like YouTube, or people, personal or individual content creators on channels like this, or Rumble and elsewhere. But they have complete monopolistic control over the legacy mainstream media, over Hollywood, over television, over just about every important academia, of course. Leftist thought is pushed everywhere. They cannot abide even a little bit of dissent from this. They must have complete 100% control. And that's why a little channel like this gets flagged. That's why, as Justin said, 100 other little channels have been flagged as well. That's why they're going hard at Joe Rogan, because he has 11 million listeners to every one of his podcasts. Mm-hmm. Do you know how many people watch CNN primetime every day? About 500,000. That's it. They are losing their grip, and I think as they it's like they're spiraling down. These I hope we can only hope and pray that these are the wails of the death cries at the end of our monopolistic legacy media having control over the narrative anymore. But this is all about narrative, and that's why there can't even be a smidgen of dissent from it, because then the whole thing comes down.
Yeah, just real quick, you mentioned anti-Semitism, Donnie. That's probably because you're a closet anti-Semite, and I know that you're a closet anti-Semite because according to the Anti-Defamation League, one of the experts that these various social media sites are using to determine what facts are and what facts are not, they say that, and I quote, usage of the Great Reset is meant to espouse anti-Semitism.
Oh no, they got me.
They finally got you. They didn't get me, because I now denounce everything bad I've ever said about the Great Reset. It's wonderful.
Yeah, right.
I
love the Great Reset.
So I mean that's proof of it though.
Isn't that offensive? Isn't that offensive? Like from there, like, the Great Reset, that's some Jew thing. Like what? Like, we've never said that.
That's the thing though, right? It goes right to what you said before. Now, does Facebook have a right to, anytime I write anything about the Great Reset, to say, Anti-Defamation League, the experts on anti-Semitism, say that this is actually just an anti-Semitism movement, that the anti-Great Reset is anti-Semitism. Is that going to be the narrative? Yeah. I mean, it's insane.
It's true,
but they have an expert group, supposedly, that is labeling it this. So ADL, why can't they do that?
The ADL they were part of like the Google's fact checking something arm. I think that they were one
I
of
don't
the
know for sure, but I think you're
Southern
right.
Poverty Law Center, ADL, and I think that there was one other one. I'm pretty sure.
I'm going to look it up.
Hey, Don.
We've got a couple of minutes, Chris. I know that you want to jump in here, but keep it short.
Yeah, I mean, this is a short point actually. So I'm worried about this in the future because I have seen a lot of polling, and as a former high school public school teacher, I noticed that young people are more than okay with silencing those who they disagree with. Look at what's happened on college campuses for the past decade or so. I'm fearful that mentality is now moving into the mainstream. Those people are taking positions of power, and it's now become the norm. And I'm actually very worried that it's going to become much worse.
Yeah, no doubt. And of course, we're going to be talking about it. Like I said, you can find our channel. All the audio listeners that are listening to this on a Friday. If you want to check out the live stream of it, the video component of it, you can't on the Heartland Institute main channel anymore. You can't do it. So you'll have to find the In the Tank podcast standalone YouTube channel, which will start streaming to live starting next week. Anyone else have any last comments, words of wisdom, anything they want to get off their chest before we sign off for the day?
I would like to make a note just to all the listeners. I'm assuming that tech censorship is something that you are concerned about. Everyone should be, regardless of party affiliation or political ideology. I would encourage everyone to reach out, not to their state level elected officials. There are a lot of state-based lawmakers who are interested in making a change on this. We're doing everything we can to reach out to them, but pressure from constituents and just concerns from their constituents goes a really long way. So please, everyone, if you're concerned, reach out. There are a lot of good people who want to try to make a change on this.
Right, and this problem's not going to go away on itself. It's only going to get worse. I naively thought that a lot of this would kind of go by the wayside once Trump was out of office, but it is not. It is absolutely not. All right, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the In Think Podcast. Again, audio only listeners, you just got to check out our live show, whether it's streaming on Facebook and Twitter, or do I have to go into my NPR voice when I do this with the music playing?
Yeah.
Do it.
So yes, you can check out our show, the live stream on Facebook or Twitter, or check out In the Tank Podcast, new channel on YouTube. If you'd like, you can follow us on Twitter at InTheTankPod. You can send us your comments, suggestions, or questions to the show by emailing us at inthethankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
You can find me at J Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and always visit heartland.org.
Fantastic. And Justin Haskins, same question to you.
This is creeping me out too much. I don't know if I can participate in it. Too creepy. At Justin T. Haskins on Socialist Twitter and Facebook and Getter and all the other socialist organizations. Well, Getter's not socialist, but the other socialist groups, you can find me there.
Samantha Fillmore, if people are interested in the work of you and GR, where can they go to stay up to date?
Go to the Heartland Institute organization or website, heartland.org, and see what we're up to.
And Chris Talgo, you are a ghost on social media, so just join me in saying goodbye to the fine people.
Go to stopingsocialism.com, Donnie.
That too. All right, thank you all for joining us. We will talk to you next week.